Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Settling into your seat, on a cushion, on the floor, in a chair, on a couch. I don't think anybody's outside. I don't see it. Doesn't look like from the screen that anybody's outside. Everybody's inside this morning. Even those of you in warm places. So today, our 7th Sunday International Sangha meeting, looking into the 7 factors of awakening. Today, we'll be covering the 6th awakening factor, which is concentration. We'll be exploring that together today. And our sit, which will start in just a few moments. I'm not going to do much of an introduction verbally. Our sit will be a little bit different than it has been for the past, 6 meetings, 5 meetings, 6 meetings, because I'll be guiding it a little bit more today. So settling in. Sitting comfortably. With or without back support as you need it. Letting the body, heart, mind relax. And we'll begin with this Samata Upanisati mindfulness of breathing practice. This practice that moves the mind, moves the heart toward an unperturbed, calm, peaceful, and lucid state. These qualities of heart-mind attained by developing a strong mental concentration. So allowing yourself today to enter into this experiment, if you will. This experiment and this guided sit, this approach to developing a concentrated mind. It's quite simple, actually, but actually also not so easy. The development of the mind in this direction is very, very valuable, and it's actually essential and a basis for engagement in all Buddhist practices. And also this Anapanasati practice, which we'll be doing together for our sit this morning. This Anapanasati practice, mindfulness of breathing practice, can also stand on its own as a very powerful and beautiful way of developing the mind. As we enter into the practice, it's important to keep the mind, keep the heart bright and spacious, so that there aren't any struggles anywhere. sitting on the floor, as I mentioned, on a cushion, in a chair, maybe in a couch, but be really careful not to get slouchy on the couch or get slouchy in relationship to the chair. A slouchy posture, sinking into the couch or the chair, won't allow the development of the brightness and interest and clear connection that's necessary for this practice. And also, as I've already mentioned, finding a comfortable posture so that there's relatively none or no discomfort, at least at this point, so that your attention isn't rooted on the gross level of struggling with body pain. The development of concentration is hindered by getting stuck and identified with attachment to any bodily or mental experience, whether it's pleasant or whether it's unpleasant. So we begin our practice period together this morning by making a simple and clear intention to make the breath, the touch sensations of the breath, your focus of attention. Upanisati practice, mindfulness of breathing practice, asks us to develop the ability to stay with the object of attention. In this case, to stay with the breath as our initial ongoing object. This is where our attention will be focused. And this is the first step of our concentration practice this morning, this afternoon, and this evening. It's basically the most important, and for many people, maybe even most people, at least at first, the most difficult step of the practice. We're applying the attention, applying our attention. And this is classically called applied thought. The Pali word is vitakka. So we apply our attention to the breath with a clear, heartful intention to constantly return the attention to the breath sensations. And we're using the area of the nostrils today. Staying relaxed and interested in this process. Which means no matter what else might arise in consciousness at any of the sense doors, we'll practice with this simple and gentle intention to not dwell anywhere but with the touch sensations of the in-breath and the out-breath in the area of the nostrils, which I call the Anapana spot, or the touching point. With each of our sense doors, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, touch, and the mind door, thought, and all of the sensory information that comes to and through each of these sense doors continuously. We're bombarded, actually, continuously. With practice of developing concentration, the intention is to let go. And just simply return to the breath. Let go, relax, and simply return to the breath with an interested, bright, and relaxed energy and attention. This is a practice of a deep and eventually quite a profound letting go. Not clinging and not pushing away, but just simply recognizing what's happening and very simply letting go, which actually means not being attached and not being averse to anything. even the silence. Also, other conditions within you and around you, or to any experiences that come in through any of the 6 sense doors, including any results or fruits of concentration practice that might show up. Again, the development of concentration is hindered by getting stuck and identified with attachment to any bodily or mental experiences, be it pleasant or unpleasant. This vitaka process, this applied thought process, it may need to occur many times within a sit. So don't worry about that. It may need to occur for you many times in a sit. As we learn, as we train the mind to bring the attention to a connected, one-pointed focus. Great patience is called for with this practice. Cultivating and learning patience is an ongoing and very primary quality of the mind and heart that happens with concentration practice, with samatha practice. I also wanted to mention 2 other qualities of mind and heart that are very important that this practice calls for, and that are quite organically developed through the practice. These are relaxation and wise effort. Another one of our factors of awakening, wise effort. True relaxation has absolutely nothing to do with lethargy or laziness, but rather it's an alert ease in body and mind. Wise effort means that we make an effort in our practice with a bright and relaxed interest. We're not practicing with a tight, tense, over-efforting. Both striving and lethargy will actually prohibit, will not allow the development of concentration, along with the tranquility that is the root that concentration grows out of. As I think I mentioned when we went into that more discussion about wise effort and energy, it's like tuning a guitar. If the strings are too loose, the music will be out of tune, of course. If the strings are too tight, they'll break. And in either case, we cannot play. So just as any musician does, in order to play the music of your practice, the beautiful music of your practice, we need to tune up regularly. So once again, just keeping it very simple. This practice of staying with the breath at the touching point as it brushes or touches either the top of the upper lip or around the edges of the nostrils, or maybe at the tip of the nose, or in that space between the nose and the upper lip. We need to be willing to let go of thought. For some of you, that's not easy. Willing to let go of thought. Willing to cut thought. And the practice of this means to just briefly, lightly recognize that it's occurring. I'll repeat that. Briefly, lightly recognize that it's occurring, and then just simply let it go. With the intention to not dwell anywhere except with the breath sensation at the touching point. This needs to remain clear and firm, but not tight, not holding it tight with this practice. So now let's all take a moment to gently make, silently within yourself, gently make a simple, clear intention to make the touch sensation of the breath your focus of attention. Let your intention stem from the heart center, the heart-mind center. And now bringing the attention to the breath sensation at the small space between the upper lip and the edges of the nostrils, or attention to the breath sensation at maybe at the top edge of your upper lip, or maybe around the edges of the nostrils, or for some people at the tip of the nose. Find your place of attention somewhere in this area. The place where at this point you're most easily able to notice and feel the sensations of an in-breath and the sensations of an out-breath. No rush to find your spot, but do find your spot, your anapana spot. At this point, let the noticing be a general noticing, keeping the attention clear and connected, but at the same time, soft and relaxed at the touching point. Again, there's no hurry, taking your time. You have all the time you need. Also, please know that if it's helpful, at times you can reconnect briefly with your intention to learn this practice, to learn this healing and beautiful practice. Not trying to force anything, but very gently, if it might be helpful, return to your intention briefly, if needed. And now mindfulness primarily of the sensations of the in-breath at your touching point. Noticing and receiving the sensations of the in-breath at your Anapana spot, however they are. Letting go of expectation, how it should be or shouldn't be. Mindful presence with how it is, in breath. Relaxed, alert, interested. And now mindfulness primarily of the sensations of the out breath at the touching point. You'll notice both the in and the out, but giving an interested primary attention to the sensations that are occurring with the out breath. And now mindfulness of both the in and the out breath sensations at the Anapana spot, at the touching point. Don't follow the breath up into the nose or into and through the body and out of the body, as this will keep you from perfecting your concentration. Keep it very simple, staying with the breath at the touching point as it brushes or touches either the top of the upper lip, the space between the nose and the upper lip, or around the nostrils, or maybe the tip of the nose. This is what will enable you to move towards perfecting your concentration. In relationship to thinking and wandering mind, this is a practice of a deep and eventually profound letting go. So, again, not clinging and not pushing away, but just very simply recognizing what's happening and very simply letting go, including, and this is an important point, including any results or fruits of concentration practice that show up. We mindfully notice what's occurring, but with no attachment and with no self-identification. It's very useful, very helpful now and ongoing throughout the practice to guard the sense doors, meaning to absorb only a minimum of sensory impressions. And this is not always so easy, as so many of us have a strong habit of looking for and letting in many, many sensory impressions. In relationship to this practice of concentration, the importance of guarding the sense doors is that it cuts down the nutriments for thinking and getting caught by or dwelling in thought. I can assure you that practicing this way is really worthwhile, and that the development, strengthening, and deepening of concentration will be nurtured through practicing this way. So we engage in this practice, this Anapanasati practice, in a more cloistered way than you may have practiced meditation previously, or that you may usually practice meditation. In-breath sensations, out-breath sensations at the touching point. Gently returning to just this. Relaxed, receptive, interested. When you notice that the developing concentration is starting to kind of crumble around the edges, or that it's maybe fading into wandering mind, or you notice that the focus of attention has been totally lost, with gentleness and the kindness of a patient heart, just simply renew your intention to come back to the breath, to focus with connection and clarity. And at the same time, with a relaxed attention to the sensations of the in-breath and the out-breath at the touching point. At times, the mind may easily get tired during the early stages of this practice, as it takes considerable effort to do this practice, even though it's so simple. If the mind gets too tired, the practice becomes a struggle and it won't be successful. So it's important to keep the energy balanced, bright, light, and high in order to stay out of the realm of struggle. Some people have such a long and strong habit of struggle that it may at first be hard to even recognize it as unskillful and unnecessary, and then to just simply let it go. But in time, with wholesome intention, wise effort, and the heart of patience, the heart mind will learn to stay out of or gently let go of struggle. So again, continuing with a one-pointed focus of attention. Applying and sustaining attention on the breath at the touching point. When the breath sensations are subtle, you should not try to make the breath more obvious, as this will cause agitation and your concentration won't develop. Just be aware of the breath as it is. And if it's not clear, simply patiently wait for it where you last noticed it. You'll find that when you apply your mindfulness and wisdom in this way, the breath will reappear. As concentration goes on developing, it's very natural that the breath becomes more and more and more subtle, not stronger and sharper. So keep going with the practice, breath by breath by breath. just before concentration starts to move into quite a deep place, when tranquility is clear and in place and sustaining, a particular sign of concentration called the nimitta, which is an object that appears in the mind and is only perceived purely in the mind because of the development of concentration. When this is on the cusp of occurring, but has not yet occurred, the breath may start to become very, very subtle and unclear. And sometimes people may even think that it's stopped. If this happens, you should keep your awareness where you last noticed the breath and wait for it there. It will reappear. The reason that it appears for some people when the subtle, subtle breath is happening, that it's not happening, is because one's mindfulness is just not strong enough for us to be aware of this very subtle breath at this point in the practice. Keeping the mind and heart bright and spacious, receptive and relaxed. Keeping it very simple. Staying with the breath at the touching point as it brushes or touches the top of the upper lip area or around the edges of the nostrils, or the space between the nose and the upper lip. As we practice with this simple intention to not dwell anywhere other than with the touch sensations of the in-breath and the out-breath. all of the wholesome energies and fruits that manifest through our practice serve with immeasurable impartiality, without bias, without prejudice, towards the welfare, the happiness, and the awakening of all beings everywhere. So now it's time for walking meditation, 10 minutes of walking or stretching, which you can do sitting down if that's what you need to do. Though the emphasis of this practice is with sitting, walking helps eliminate the mental factors that hinder the development of concentration. Walking can also help to encourage the development of concentration. Even the factors of deeper concentration by bringing a more balanced energy into one's practice. Walking practice with this practice of Anapanasati refreshes the mind and the body. So we walk at an easy, relaxed, medium slow pace of walking, not super slow and not fast. And it's important to continue with the intention to sustain the attention of the breath at the nostrils. Primarily, you'll notice the movement of the body, but keep coming back to the Anapana spot and quickly recognizing and letting go of any proliferation of thinking. The Pali word for that is papancha. With this practice, there needs to be a willingness to let go of thought, as I've already mentioned. During walking, it can be a good time to practice with this. So again, an easy, relaxed, medium slow pace of walking, either inside or outside. Continuing with the sustained attention on the breath in the nostril area at your Anapana spot. So I'll ring the bell in 10 minutes. You'll have to keep track of your time, your own time to some degree, depending how far away from your audio availability with your computer is when you're walking. And we'll come back together in 10 minutes. Relaxing into your seat, opening the ear doors. Receiving sound. And I'll offer some Dhamma reflection regarding this sixth factor of awakening, concentration. And beginning with a story about the Buddha when he was a child, partly from when he was a child. After 6 years of engaging in extreme ascetic practices and finding that, in fact, they weren't bringing the liberation of heart and mind that he was seeking, it said that the Bodhisattva Siddhartha Gautama, who was to become a Buddha, our Buddha, asked himself, could there be another path to enlightenment? Could there be another path to awakening other than these extreme ascetic practices? In reflection with this inner questioning, an image, a memory in the form of an image of a particular experience from his childhood appeared to Siddhartha Gautama. He remembered a particular spring day when he was a boy of 6. That morning, his father had taken him to the spring plowing festival, a time each year when the men in the community, rich and poor alike, came together for a day of plowing up the earth, an annual ritual marking the beginning of the spring planting season. Young Siddhartha was seated comfortably and quietly under a sweet-smelling rose apple tree, observing the scene that was unfolding before him with a very open, alert, and unfettered attention, that attention that children can sometimes easily give to things. Nothing really on his mind. In those moments of not wanting or fearing anything, he was aware of the earth breaking open in even wave-like furrows, noticing the heat shimmering up off the freshly opened soil. He was aware of the shining and the sweating faces and straining bodies of the men and the oxen. And he noticed the flash and the sparkling of sunlight coming off the bronze harnesses and the dark horns of the oxen. He felt the plodding rhythm of the oxen's hooves and cowbells rolling on and on and on amidst the strong, sharp shouts of the men as they were working. He also clearly heard the beautiful sound of birdsong, as well as the shrill cries of the birds as they dove and pecked and devoured the swarming insects, the grubs, worms, and broken bodies of the mice that were left out on the upturned earth. All of this laboring, devouring, struggling, suffering, and dying endlessly, going on beneath and right along with the gaiety, joy, and the beauty of that spring festival day. All of this entered into young Siddhartha's heart and mind as he sat alone, clearly focused and deeply relaxed under the sweet-smelling rose apple tree, as he open-heartedly experienced the scene that was going on right in front of him. And in his heart, finding no resistance, no tension, no inner conflict, nothing to add, nothing to take away, no picking, no choosing. As he silently sat quite still and secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states of mind, and taking all of this in without prejudice and without any attachment, he experienced a sweet pleasure, a happiness that was not born out of desire for or clinging to anything. And in his young mind, a deep, intuitive understanding was seeded. As a young man, in remembering this experience, the thought occurred to Siddhartha, could that be the path to enlightenment? And it's said that following on the memory of this joyful, tranquil, and insightful experience from his childhood, the Bodhisattva became filled with energy and sureness that this, in fact, was an aspect or the path to liberation. This was, in fact, the path to awakening. And so he resolved to sit quietly and to press forward in deep meditation until he reached full understanding, until he reached true freedom, until he woke up. This was actually a turning point for the Buddha to be in his quest for awakening and in his quest for enlightenment. This was the turning point and a change in his relationship to suffering and in his evaluation of pleasure. At that most important point of turning in his quest for liberation, Siddhartha realized that the confusion, the misunderstanding, the delusion, the greed, anger, anguish, and hatred, all of the dark and afflictive states of mind wouldn't be, and in fact couldn't be, purified or banished, released or let go of, or relinquished by creating hardships for oneself and then trying to put up with them or trying to live through them, or by toughing it out in relationship to these self-inflicted hardships, or by trying to let go or trying to lose one's self in them. And if you consider your own life, how many times in small and maybe even in tiny ways, or possibly even in extreme ways, have you, out of ignorance, out of delusion, out of misunderstanding, chosen to engage in situations, activities, relationships that created hardship in your life? And maybe sometimes even extreme hardship. And in your own way, doing just what the Buddha did, and thinking that just as he did, that this would somehow bring a sustaining joy and happiness and ease into your life. Potentially a certain kind of strength may be gained, but the light at the end of the tunnel, so to say, the light of awakening, can never be seen, felt, or known with this way. As a young man, and remembering his childhood experiences, Siddhartha realized that pleasure was no longer to be feared and banished through the practice of extreme austerities, and that this would actually never bring a sustaining sense of well-being. He understood that when pleasure is born internally, within a mind, a heart that's secluded, that's free from the mental and bodily hindrances of lethargy, restlessness, greed, and clinging, free from the various permutations of aversion, confusion, or doubt. He understood that when pleasure is born of seclusion, clear, concentrated presence, and detachment, that it's not only okay, but that it's a valuable and necessary accompaniment along the path of awakening, and that it in fact points to the sustaining happiness of a heart, a mind that's no longer run by the energies of greed, clinging, fear, judgment, anger, and confusion. That in fact it points to the sustaining happiness and ease of a heart, a mind that's awake, a heart, a mind that's liberated. As a child, this natural state of an undisturbed mind is something that young Siddhartha wandered into, so to say. The world outside going on just as it is, thoughts and feelings arising and changing, coming and going, no different in those moments than anything else in the world. Nothing to agree with, nothing to argue with, nothing to cling to, nothing to push away, and nothing to run from. And this natural state of an undisturbed mind isn't so easy to wander into for most of us. Why? Well, we so often have a mind made up, absolutely made up about how it's supposed to be or how it isn't supposed to be, what's good, what's bad, what we definitely for sure absolutely know is true, what we definitely for sure absolutely know isn't true. We so often have a mind made up about what we must have or must not have in order to be happy, and even in order to meditate, to do practice. A mind made up, a mind that clings to what it's made up. This is what prevents us from directly, clearly, and honestly meeting the moment that we're in. This is what keeps us in conflict, keeps us from the possibility of wandering into the natural state of an undisturbed mind. This is essentially the cause of our suffering and what prevents the mind and heart from calmly and peacefully connecting directly and clearly with present moment experience, both internally and externally. The teachings and practices that we've inherited from the Buddha fall into three basic currents, we could say. The first current being sila, Pali word, sila, which translates as virtue or ethical behavior. The second current is that of Samata or Samadhi, concentration, the teaching and the practice of concentration. And the third current is that of Vipassana, the teaching and the practice of insight, the teaching and the practice of wisdom. These three currents are what carried the Buddha and what carry us along and across the great and often challenging river of this life that carry us to the other side, to the side of a peaceful, easeful, awakened presence, the side of living within the natural state of an undisturbed heart and mind. The development and the combination of the first two of these qualities or capacities of heart, virtue and concentration, are what lead us into Vipassana, the deeply penetrative understanding that comes through the direct meditative experience of the various insights that show up, the liberating insights. The Buddha commented that the practice of Vipassana, the practice of insight, without the support of samatha, without the support of concentration, is like, he said, it's like sending a minister out to negotiate with bandits without the protection of a bodyguard. So as awakening beings, here we are today. more than 2,500 years since the story that I shared about the Buddha took place. And thanks to Siddhartha Gautama's diligent and powerful 6 years of practice, here we are exploring and learning from his direct experience and the inspired clarity of his ability to pass it on. Because our retreat today is devoted to exploring the beautiful and purifying current of concentration, I think it would be helpful for us to explore and learn a bit about the basis, the process, and the fruits of concentration. And so we'll take a look at the active force of Samata, of Samadhi, of concentration. This unperturbed, peaceful, and lucid state of mind attained by the practice and process of strong mental concentration. This process of gathering in, gathering together the energy, the potentially very powerful energy of the mind, which is ordinarily quite dispersed. We could say that the initial act of concentration is that of reining the mind in from all of its myriad distractions and learning how to focus it by coming back again and again and again to the simple present, so that our mental and our physical energy isn't being used up or usurped in unconscious and unskillful ways. This notion of developing the mind lies at the heart of all Buddhist traditions. One important aspect of this development has to do with strengthening one's ability to focus, to stabilize, and to direct the mind, rather than allowing it to be carried off over and over and over again by whatever breezes, if you will, waft in upon it from any of the sense doors or from its own unconscious. So in light of this, you can ask yourself this question: does your mind control you, or do you control your mind? So, for instance, if your intention is to keep your attention at the breath, but the mind just keeps wandering off at the slightest provocation, then your ability to focus the mind isn't yet very well developed. One of the wonderful things that practice offers us is that remaining focused on a chosen object is a skill that can be learned. And like any other skill, it can be learned by practice, by patient repetition, and gradual development. The Visuddhimagga, which is a profoundly detailed Buddhist treatise on the process of purification, has a number, writes in it are a number of very graphic metaphors to describe the process and the development and the act of concentration. And one of these metaphors that I particularly relate to because of my own experience in creating pottery on a potter's wheel is this. A lump of clay sits on a spinning potter's wheel. Centering the clay, the potter brings both hands directly onto the clay, holding, staying there with a strong and relaxed focus of attention of body and mind. Staying, sustaining attention and energy, totally undistracted as the clay is centered on the wheel. Then the potter, with a continued focus of clear, connected, and relaxed attention, with one hand directly on the clay, steadily holding and supporting the clay. The other hand also continuing to sustain contact with the clay, which continues to be the object of attention. The other hand is moving back and forth, up and down, informing the clay, at the same time as being informed by it, as a bowl forms. So quite a graphic and visceral metaphor for the development and process of concentration. With the mind, the heart, learning to move in a focused experience of deepening concentration. The power of a clear, relaxed, and focused mind, a concentrated mind, brings together and re-stimulates itself again and again, re-stimulates the energy and the effort that's needed for the next moment of continuing its process. It's just where it is, pure and clear. The wholesome states of concentration, calm, tranquility, joy, and peace, along with deeper states of concentration called jhana, they cannot grow, develop and grow when the unwholesome mind states of attachment, aversion, sleepiness, agitation, worry, and doubt are occurring. Seeing and understanding the difference between wholesome states of mind and unwholesome states of mind is essential for the development and blossoming of concentration. So, for instance, if you try to concentrate on a meditation subject such as the breath, and you're anxious and worried during the process, it will prevent you from being tranquil. Why is this? Well, worry enslaves us. With the practice of concentration, one needs to be willing to let go, cut thought, as I've already mentioned, even thoughts that might seem so important in the moment. Clarity of intention, seeing and knowing when the attention gets muddled or lost is in something other than what's intended, as I've already mentioned, is the first and maybe the most important and sometimes the most difficult step of the practice. Our minds can get lost in myriad mundane thoughts and actions, thinking that whatever it is really, really important. I had such an experience some years ago during a 3-month concentration retreat, a Jhana Concentration retreat, that I was sitting with one of my teachers, Pawak Sayadaw. For the first week of the retreat, I would make myself a very fancy cup of tea after lunch, taking 2 or 3 different loose teas and mixing them together in a tea ball. An important and seemingly necessary treat that I thought I really needed, that I definitely wanted. Well, after about a week of doing this, I noticed that there were a box of tea bags of one of the same kinds of teas that was in my mix sitting on the counter right under the jars of all of the loose teas. It had been there every day, of course, but I hadn't paid any attention to it up until that very moment. And then the thought came when I noticed it. Do I really need this? Is all of this fancy tea preparation and seemingly need, is this really important? Well, very quickly, the answer no came to myself internally. It's not at all important. It's merely a habitual distraction. So that day I made a simple cup of tea with the tea bag and enjoyed it fully. What happened after this is what was really important. Quite spontaneously, and at times throughout the rest of that 3-month retreat, the question would come up, is this important? Is this really important in relationship to various things? It would come up in relationship to various mundane action and in relationship to various thoughts and various thought patterns. Well, the answer was almost always, if not pretty much eventually 100% of the time, quite clearly and more obviously, no. And I would then just simply let go of whatever it was at that point. Took a while to get there, though. The development of a wholesome concentration requires of us that we have at least some insight and a growing interest and understanding regarding the difference between wholesome and unwholesome states of mind. And one of the most amazing and wonderful fruits that inevitably occurs through the process of developing concentration is that the heart and mind are continually being purified from the various permutations of greed, aversion, lethargy, restlessness, and doubt. Classically, the development of concentration and the deeper states of concentration called jhana is described as the purification of the mind. Samata in Pali, Samadhi in Sanskrit, or the development of calm, of the calm within concentration, seriously weakens all of the hindrances. Concentration, the development of concentration, seriously weakens the unwholesome states of mind. When calm and tranquility, happiness, bliss, peace, and the developing equanimity, these fruits of concentration practice, when they clearly begin to manifest, the hindrances, unwholesome mind states are temporarily completely eliminated and more profoundly weakened, particularly if one attains the deeper states of concentration. In order to see the true nature of existing phenomena, we need to purify the mental cloudiness, to part the veil, untangle the tangle that keeps us from seeing it. And this occurs through the practices of sila, samata or samadhi, and panya, all of which are rooted in mindfulness, mindfulness being the first factor of awakening. The Buddha, in speaking with one of his disciples, Ananda, says that, Ananda asks the Buddha a question in this sutta. Ananda says, what is the purpose of skillful virtues? What is their reward? And the Buddha responds, skillful virtues have freedom from remorse as their purpose, Ananda, and freedom from remorse as their award. And he goes on, freedom from remorse has joy as its purpose, joy as its reward. Joy has rapture as its purpose, rapture as its reward. Rapture has serenity as its purpose, serenity as its reward. Serenity has pleasure as its purpose, pleasure as its reward. Pleasure has concentration as its purpose, concentration as its reward. Concentration has knowledge and vision of things as they actually are as its purpose. Knowledge and vision of things as they actually are as its reward. In this way, Ananda, skillful virtues lead step by step by step to the consummation of freedom from suffering. They lead step by step to the end of suffering. In order for us to learn how to properly apply these three active forces of purification, virtue, concentration, and wisdom, just as the Buddha did, we also need to learn directly from our own experience. It's not an intellectual process. We learn directly from our own experience. And sometimes from our most difficult experiences, and sometimes also from what we may deem to be our mistakes, as well as learning from our quieter, pleasant, beautiful, and subtle experiences. We could say that the purification of the mind and the heart is synonymous with this act of learning. Samata, or the development of calm and concentration, seriously weakens all the hindrances, seriously weakens these unwholesome states of mind. So now taking a bit of a look at how the different factors of a growing and deepening concentration quite specifically address different states of mind and body that can hinder the development of concentration and that also hinder the blossoming of insight. To begin with, overall calm and the development of a more tranquil body and mind is an antidote to feeling perturbed, obviously. Calm and tranquility free the mind, free the heart from impurities and inner obstacles, giving the mind a much greater penetrative strength. The mental state of initially applying the mind, aiming and applying the attention again and again to the object, the vitaka process, and eventually establishing the mind, establishing the attention on the object, such as the sensations of the in and the out breath in the area of the nostrils at the touching point. This eventually, temporarily eliminates dullness, sleepiness, and stiffness. The sustained application of the mind, a continuous sustained attention on the object, such as the breath, this vichara process, as I mentioned during our guided sit. Eventually, this temporarily eliminates uncertainty and doubt within the practice, and it weakens these afflictive states to some degree overall. The deeply concentrated and mindful state of zest, joyful zest, a bright happiness in the mind resulting from the developing focus and purity of the heart-mind. Piti in Pali is the word for these experiences. This brings a delighted interest in and liking of the object of attention, such as the breath. And with the development of a deepening concentration, which results in various degrees and expressions of piti, often initially anyways, in the body, sensations such as vibration and tingling initially. With this development and the deepening of concentration, ill will is temporarily inhibited. If one moves into the deeper states of concentration, jhana, the first and second jhana, in a deeply absorbed state of concentration, there's much delight and liking of the object of attention, which is one aspect of the direct experience of jhana itself, not the breath at that point, but jhana itself. At this point, all forms of ill will are completely, temporarily inhibited and weakened. And lastly, the steady, undistracted attention of a one-pointed focus, of a deepening concentration. The Pali word for this is ekaggata. With this occurring to varying degrees during the development stages of concentration that's rooted in mindfulness, and then happening to a much more profound and sustaining way during absorption in the fourth jhana. This one-pointed focus of attention is the experience of a very clear, strong, and pervasive energy, centeredness, balance, and eventually equanimity. During this time, sensuous desire for anything is temporarily inhibited, is temporarily completely at bay. When through our Samata practice, the imperfections, the states that corrupt the natural purity of the heart mind, when at least some of these imperfections have been clearly let go, abandoned, and relinquished, temporarily or for a longer period of time, at that time, one really truly knows and gains a much greater, fuller, and deeper confidence in and connection to one's own practice. Also, when this confidence arises, the mind and heart very often experience great inspiration, enthusiasm, and appreciation connected to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. As awakening beings, when we begin to directly experience and know ourselves as purified of unwholesome states, when we directly experience and know ourselves as at least partially liberated from them, a great gladness and gratitude is born in us. And when there's gladness in us, joyful zest and elation is born in us. And with this joy and the knowing of it, without any attachment in those moments, the body becomes very tranquil. The subtle bodily and mental disturbances that are connected with gladness and joy are removed. They disappear with the calm and quiet, this serene pleasure of tranquility. When we experience tranquility, we feel pleasure. When pleasure is felt, the mind is then prepared for deepening concentration. And on it goes. At this point, the mind and heart are very, very strong. And so in the light, in this light, one of the skills that's being developed is our ability to resist or deflect the influence of raga. Raga being the Pali word that is literally translated as unwholesome passion. It's often used synonymously with greed, unwholesome desire, craving, attachment, and clinging, all of which are the core cause of our human suffering, the core cause of our dukkha, the Pali word dukkha. At the time of the Buddha, an analogy that was often used regarding this aspect of the development of the mind was that the effectiveness of a well-thatched roof lies in its ability to deflect moisture and protects the contents of the house from getting soaked. With the analogy being that a well-developed mind will be aware of an unwholesome thought or emotion that has arisen, or will be aware of a provocative sense input, but will allow these to just simply roll off the mind and not penetrate into the immediately following mind moments to drench the mind with clinging or to drench the mind with aversion. A similar image that was often used was that of water rolling off a lotus leaf or water rolling off the feathers of a duck. As concentration develops, slowly we gain the wisdom and the confidence to allow ourselves to wholeheartedly meet experience with not self, no me, no I am, while at the same time being clearly present and mindfully aware of what's taking place, but with no pondering, no commentary, no thinking about what's occurring, and not making something out of the experience, but rather receiving, sensing, seeing, and knowing experience just as it is. So now I'd like to just briefly talk a little bit about the 3 types of concentration. Some information that I think will be helpful for some of you, at least maybe all of you. The nature of concentration is threefold. Or in other words, there are 3 types or 3 levels, we could say, of concentration that develop and that can also serve our insight practice. The first of these is what's called in Pali Kanaka Samadi, translated as momentary concentration. This is the development and growing maturation of one's ability to focus on one object after another object after another object. The development of our capacity to really clearly connect with one object, then another object, and another object, one by one, and ongoing, moment by moment. Momentary concentration, Kanaka Samadi. The cultivation of one's capacity for momentary concentration is essential for insight practice, is essential for vipassana practice. The second type or level of concentration is called Upachara Samadi, or access concentration, or the translation that I really like is neighborhood concentration. This is a very deep and powerful concentration that occurs just before one moves into absorption or jhana concentration. And it can be re-accessed and used for insight practice upon coming out of the absorption of jhana. Neighborhood concentration is often experienced as similar to the intensity and depth of absorption or jhana concentration, but important, it's not an absorbed concentration, meaning it does not stay focused on one object at the exclusion of other objects, as does jhana. With upachara, access or neighborhood concentration, the mind is very malleable. It's able to move from object to object to object. So from this perspective, access concentration or neighborhood concentration can be very helpful and very useful in the unfolding of insight practice. The third type or third level of concentration is jhana concentration. And this is a concentrated mind that completely absorbs into one object at the exclusion of all other objects. When the mind is absorbed in this way, it's not possible for the mind to do anything else at that time. The development of concentration will quite naturally take place in our vipassana, our insight practice, particularly and specifically momentary concentration, Kanaka Samadi, especially when we begin to meet all of the various body-mind phenomena with less and less clinging, attachment, and identification, but rather with an interested, open-hearted, investigative attitude. The development of jhana and access concentration takes a very specific and concerted effort. That's not everyone's inclination and not everyone's interest. And it's not absolutely necessary for a potentially liberating vipassana insight practice to unfold. The achievement of jhana concentration may require many months or even many years of single-pointed practice, meditating for many hours every day. And this certainly may be impractical for some people, for most people probably. For others, it might be possible and worthwhile in moving towards the discoveries that lie in wait for us when we apply the telescope, we could say, of Samata or concentration to explore the deep space of the mind. In closing today's Dhamma reflection, I'd like to say that it is essential that you hold your practice in the light of honesty, humility, and an open-hearted interest, and hold yourself within your practice with kindness and with patience. These wholesome and beautiful qualities will, without a doubt, serve the blossoming of your practice, and without a doubt are the basic human qualities that the fruits of practice stem from. These wholesome and beautiful qualities are the root of what allows us the possibility of entering into the natural state of an undisturbed mind. Our practice is about the unification of Samata and Vipassana, the unification of concentration and insight. And as Tibetan Buddhist teacher B. Alan Wallace says, the transformative power of Buddhist meditation occurs when the stability and vividness of concentration is unified with the penetrating insights of Vipassana. Samata, or concentration, by itself results in a temporary alleviation of the fundamental causes of suffering, and Vipassana by itself provides only fleeting glimpses of reality. So our practice is about the unification of concentration, or Samata, and Vipassana. So I'd like to close our Dhamma reflection with a poem by Mary Oliver that speaks to today's topic in her really quite unique and beautiful way, and in relationship to this topic in a somewhat oblique and yet very moving way. And I have to say that this poem is a bit out of season here in New Mexico and elsewhere. So I encourage each of you to make the shift internally to a more spring-like environment as we take in Mary Oliver's poem. And she titled this poem, "Such Singing in the Wild Branches." It was spring, and finally I heard him among the first leaves, and then I saw him clutching the limb in an island of shade with his red-brown feathers all trim and neat for the new year. First I stood still and thought of nothing, and then I began to listen, and then I was filled with gladness. And that's when it happened, when I seemed to float, to be myself, a wing or a tree, and I began to understand what the bird was saying, and the sands in the glass stopped for a pure white moment while gravity sprinkled upward like rain rising. And in fact, it became difficult to tell just what it was that was singing. It was the thrush, for sure, but it seemed not a single thrush, but himself and all his brothers and sisters, and also the trees around them, as well as the gliding, long-tailed clouds in the perfectly blue sky. All of them were singing. And of course, yes, so it seemed, so was I. Such soft and solemn and perfect music doesn't last for more than a few moments. It's one of those magical places wise people like to talk about. One of the things they say about it is that is true, is that once you've been there, you're there forever. Listen, everyone has a chance. Is it spring? Is it morning? Are there trees near you? And does your own soul need comforting? Quick then, open the door and fly on your heavy feet. The song may already be drifting away. And let's sit silently for just a few moments together. And thank you for listening to the Dhamma. And thank you for your practice.